Taiwan, an island at the heart of international tensions, is both militarily encircled and politically isolated. Perceived by China as a rebellious province, it faces constant threats of forced reunification.
他想统一台湾，其实不是统一啦，平摊台湾。
我觉得台湾是应该要独立的，因为台湾跟中国已经是两个不同的世界了。
I believe Taiwan has always been an independent country. Yeah, because we have different passport, we have different currency, we have our own president, we have our own laws and people.
那国际友人不支持的情况之下，那其实我们面临到的压力会更大。
这一个战斗，虽然我们是要备战，他们也这样讲，不过基本上我认为那个都是涉及到国际的这个争霸。
台湾独立是一条漫长的路，我们牺牲很多人。
今天台湾有什么看法？就想办法打回去啊！就算要死掉，还是要打，人家都已经踩到你家里了。
Recognized as a sovereign state by only a few nations, Taiwan endures the world's strategic indifference, paralyzed by Beijing's economic influence. Yet, this modern democracy, driven by a people proud of their identity, stands strong in resistance. Taiwan embodies a fragile balance between technological progress, democratic aspirations, and geopolitical challenges. Inhabited for millennia by Austronesian indigenous peoples, Taiwan long remained on the margins of major Chinese dynasties. This isolated territory became a coveted prize in the 17th century. In 1624, the Dutch established themselves in the south of the island, followed by the Spanish in the north. However, in 1662, the Chinese general and pirate Coxing expelled the Europeans and made Taiwan a base to resist the Manchu Qing dynasty, which in turn annexed the island in 1683. For 2 centuries, Taiwan remained a peripheral region of the Qing Empire, marked by constant tensions between Han settlers, indigenous peoples, and imperial authorities. At the end of the 19th century, the weakened Qing Empire, having suffered military defeats, ceded Taiwan to Japan in 1895 after the First Sino-Japanese War, under the Treaty of Shimonoseki. For China, this forced cession was never accepted.
从清朝到日治的时候，日本花了很多时间在教台湾人日语，所以设立了一些学校。当时日本设立了初等教育，叫做公学校，就是给台湾人念的。那时候的公学校主要目的就是要让台湾的小孩子懂日语。
During Japanese rule, Taiwan underwent rapid modernization. Japan built infrastructure, improved agriculture, and imposed a strict education system. Japanese language and customs became dominant, leaving a lasting impact on Taiwanese society. In 1945, after Japan's defeat, Taiwan was returned to the Republic of China under the control of Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang. However, this transition brought corruption and tensions. In 1947, the February 28th incident, also known as the 228 incident, erupted, symbolizing growing discontent with the Kuomintang regime, which was seen as incapable of governing the island.
很多人都失业，那228就是因为他们去误打死一个人，就是去现在台北圆环那边要去抓私烟的一位女士哈，那跪下来求，那当然旁边人就看得很不爽，就是打怕敌啊，所以后来那4个人就逃，那4个警察逃，到结果我讲他不是故意的，擦枪走火了，就打死一位从当兵回来的台湾人啊，第2天就引起整个台湾就开始。简直是暴动了，那这样大概持续10天左右，那国民党就开军队进来了。
It is estimated that between 20,000 and 30,000 people died in the 228 incident massacre. This brutal repression by the Kuomintang marked the beginning of the White Terror, a dark period during which thousands of Taiwanese were imprisoned, executed, or disappeared. Meanwhile, mainland China was plunging into chaos. Since the 1920s, Chiang Kai-shek, leader of the nationalists, and Mao Zedong, leader of the communists, had been vying for power. In 1949, after a decisive military defeat, Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan with 2 million supporters. The island then became the last stronghold of the Kuomintang, where Chiang hoped to organize a reconquest. However, geopolitical isolation and authoritarian rule soon trapped Taiwan in increasing isolation. Not all Chinese who arrived in Taiwan were part of the Kuomintang. Some, like Mei Jia's parents, fled the war under desperate conditions.
我的爸爸和妈妈呢，其实是从福建移民过来的。那说移民啊，其实我觉得是难民啊，因为爸爸他是在当时觉得北方已经有战争，所以呢，他就想说到东南亚去看看，所以他们爸爸的兄弟呢，全部到东南亚有到缅甸的，到香港的。那爸爸来了台湾，爸爸来了以后，因为妈妈也在住在厦门那爸爸都不回去，而且那时候战事已经非常越来越大，所以呢，他呢这个就是也想要来台湾。在当时，因为在厦门那里生活已经非常的有困境所以他就是搭着那个扇板，舅舅协助之下那搭着扇板非常危险的然后到台湾。那妈妈到台湾的时候呢，她是从花莲港上岸。
Upon his arrival in Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek's military influence was initially concentrated in the east of the island, a mountainous and sparsely populated region. However, in the west, where most of the population and infrastructure were located, he quickly imposed a military dictatorship accompanied by an all-encompassing cult of personality. In 1949, Chiang declared martial law, officially to eradicate any communist infiltration. In reality, this measure reinforced the White Terror, a regime of systematic and arbitrary repression.
白色恐怖就是在戒严的时期，人民的很多权利被冻结了。我们不能主张言论自由，不能主张集会结社自由，不能主张那个投票自由，就是很多权利是不能主张的。所以还有集会结社，还有通讯，很多权利不能主张。所以只要你违反了这些规定，或者是政府觉得你违反了这些规定，你就可能会被抓走。然后刑法第101条里面就有规定了，如果你有反动的嫌疑，你就可以被抓走，反动思想就可以被抓走。问题来了，思想是在脑海里啊，你怎么知道我有这个思想？
然后就任何状况都可以抓人。那我觉得大家是乱抓，那有人公报私仇所以任何人只要说他是匪谍，那就抓起来。其实那时候哪里有什么匪谍？可是他把所有人都当作匪谍，匪谍者就是指中国共产党，所以他们叫匪谍。
Under martial law, Taiwan was plunged into systematic repression. Meanwhile, mainland China, under Mao Zedong's control, intensified military pressure to reaffirm its claim over the island. In 1954 and 1955, the First Taiwan Strait crisis erupted when Beijing bombarded the Taiwan-controlled islands of Jinmen and Mazu. As part of its struggle against communist expansion, the United States strengthened its military support for Chiang Kai-shek. A second crisis in 1958 further solidified this military alliance while illustrating China's determination to challenge the island's de facto independence. Meanwhile, internal repression in Taiwan remained relentless. The charges against political prisoners were often identical, attempting to overthrow the government. Yang Bichuang, then 20 years old, was arrested for thoughts deemed subversive. Yang Bichuang was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
当然是 special agent 抓的嘛，而且有跟踪，然后一抓去你就什么都要承认了，你不承认也不行。他已经写好脚本叫你照写，那个就叫自白书 confess。我是没有被打了，但是他说不让我睡觉，就是让你一直这样，到最后你的整个精神都崩溃了。然后后来我就知道说他们要什么，他们就是要我承认。那我承认以后，我就想说，这下大概可以就死了算了。我当时没有说会活下来的想法。
Shortly after his incarceration, in February 1970, the Taiyuan prison incident marked a turning point under martial law. Political prisoners attempted a daring escape, hoping to spark a guerrilla campaign for Taiwan's independence. Their plan failed, leading to mass arrests and severe sentences. On Chiang Kai-shek's orders, the 6 main organizers were sentenced to death by firing squad. Following this incident, prisoners were sent to the Oasis Villa on Green Island, an isolated location off Taiwan's east coast. Yang Bichuang would spend 7 years there.
去绿岛我还发现对我来讲是天堂，因为我自己一个人被关在一个房间3年。理由是不合作但是包括我生病所以他就把我一个人关起来。那在之前有一个很有趣的笑话，就是我刚到的时候盲肠炎发作结果送去要开刀，那没有麻醉剂，就4个人把我抓着，当场这样用刀子刮着，器官火灾。那之后我就自己一个人关了，也不能看书，也不能写字，什么都没有，只能看天花板。那我就天天在想说，怎么拍电影。因为我跟别人的那个不一样的，那后来就跟大家关在一起那就开始学习，全台湾最好的老师都关在绿岛，所以我就碰到全台湾最好的老师，就学了很多东西。因为我高中毕业就抓去关了嘛，那就可以学到很多奇奇怪怪的东西，包括怎么印钞票，怎么印假钞。
While Yang Bichuang remained imprisoned on Green Island, cut off from the outside world, Taiwan underwent major upheavals. On the international stage, the United States adopted a policy of strategic ambiguity. In 1971, they supported the admission of the People's Republic of China to the United Nations. Still governed by Mao Zedong at the time, in an effort to weaken the Soviet Union. However, in 1979, the Taiwan Relations Act ensured continued military support for Taiwan, deterring Beijing from invading the island while also preventing a formal declaration of independence. Domestically, after Chiang Kai-shek's death in 1975, his son Chiang Ching-kuo took over in 1978, consolidating his authority and initiating a period of political transition. A year later, the Formosa incident, which took place during a peaceful human rights demonstration, was brutally suppressed. Pro-democracy activists were arrested and accused of plotting against the state. Though harshly repressed, this event catalyzed a national awakening and marked the beginning of Taiwan's democratic transition. A few years later, it paved the way for the creation of the Democratic Progressive Party, the first official opposition to the Kuomintang, laying the foundation for Taiwan's democratization.
民进党的出现其实是因为党外人士。什么叫党外人士？就是在戒严的时候，那个时候台湾有一些人不能接受国民党的高压统治，所以他们就在进行党外运动，就是借由选举当时的省议员，或者是发行一些不被允许的杂志，然后去做连结，然后形成一股党外势力。
大家都选举嘛，国民党为了要缓和这个紧张，他知道美丽岛抓了那么多人，很多人一定很不满。其实他那么做，大家都怕了，除了我们以外，大家都吓坏了，以为说又是一次228会发生。那直到开始有选举，那他又不能禁止党外的人来参选，所以慢慢，这个东西就到1986年以后，就928就偶然的，不是故意的，是偶然的，有酝酿这样要酝酿，但是突然在那一天那就有人去推动，那就开始弄出来以后，
这股党外势力在1975年的时候，在民国75年的时候，他们决定要成立一个党，叫做民进党，民主进步党。他们的成立大会是在高雄的圆山饭店。他们的成立大会那时候还没有解严，所以他们其实都做好准备了。就是当他们的成立大会进行的时候，应该会有警察来把他们带走、抓走，根据戒严的法令。可是他们发现当时虽然有警察在，但是他们并没有被带走，所以他们很惊讶。果然，民国76年台湾就解严了。然后民进党就从75年之后成为一个政党，然后就开始。
In 1987, after years of internal and international pressure, Chiang Ching-kuo made a historic decision by lifting martial law. This marked a turning point for Taiwan, leading to expanded freedom of expression and the official recognition of opposition parties, particularly the DPP. In 1988, shortly after this major reform, Chiang Ching-kuo died of cancer, leaving Taiwan at a political crossroads. His death marked the end of an era of authoritarianism, deeply shaped by his father's legacy. Power then passed to his vice president, Lee Teng-hui, known as the father of Taiwan's democracy. Pragmatic and visionary, Lee quickly took bold steps to continue opening up the country and set Taiwan on the path to democracy.
他的儿子都是乱七八糟的，所以他最后是选择李登辉。但是以他当时的想法是，李登辉只是一个傀儡而已，没有想到李登辉变成真的，而且台湾人选的竟然是他。因为他们以为所谓外省人就是可以万世统治台湾的，他们有枪，我们没有枪。
谈到1987，我们说那是一个黎明到来的一天，然后就是以前都是黎明啊，感觉伸手不见五指的样子，那天突然亮了。天忽然就是好像，这个忽然一切都好像亮了啊，因为这是蒋经国很大的一个改变哦，所以从那个时候，我们的到处都充满了工作机会。我其实想要进《天下》杂志，在这个我就从来也没有想到过哈，就是那时候。有非常非常多的杂志社、出版社或者是媒体开放了，而且我们可以到很多地方去旅行，那在那个时候经济的成长非常好，我也在那个时候有很多的工作机会。
This shift also marked the beginning of a period of reconciliation and openness. Restrictions on the press, political gatherings, and even travel to mainland China were eased. Taiwan embarked on a process of democratization that culminated in the 1990s with the first direct presidential election, bringing an end to decades of authoritarian control. The abolition of martial law and the death of Chiang Ching-kuo not only marked the end of military dictatorship, but also the beginning of a new era for Taiwan, one in which democracy and freedom of expression became the pillars of the island's political future. Tianhin ran twice as a candidate for the Democratic Progressive Party in Taichung. Today, having retired from politics, he runs a modest street food stand in Tainan.
那台湾真正获取到出版的自由，然后集会的自由，然后公开演说的自由，其实都一直是到了1980年代的后期。对，那当时就是蒋经国前总统的执政时期，然后当然有受到国际上的压力，然后也加上他本人的意志，也知道长期的威权统治是不可能的，所以到了他的执政的晚期，其实有开始在放宽。那当时，但是在实际上的执行上，这些追求自由的举措都还不是受到鼓励的。所以，即使在法律上，当时台湾的法律上是有这些的自由的，但实际上却是困难重重。这就是威权时代的最末尾，在80年代后期，在台湾的实际上的状况。
像后来在1949年中国成立以后，它是是集权的啊。他们虽然是，就像我在北京住过1年，北京的中央电视台。他是帮你想好了，因为他们是是一个比较上面都想好了集权的啊，然后帮你想好了，他有很多电视台国际的、国内的，包括两岸的，包括他都包括还有英文的电视台啊，他好像都很多哦。那个这一个，但是呢，大部分就是由上面是国家的啊。那在台湾像我们在媒体那你就可以那时候就开始开放了这个媒体，所以我一直在媒体工作就是我觉得在当时在台湾不断起飞的那个年代，包括到后来的像Blog 那个时候，有的时候我们就大家在 Blog 都讲任何话，政治的去旅行到世界各地。后来这个 blog 之后呢，就有了脸书，就是那个 Facebook 有了脸书，有了 Twitter 有了什么，那我们就在上面畅所欲言然后接着像 YouTube， 我们就在上面很多人就你讲政治讲到极限了，你就爆红然后呢，你到讲美食你就是爆红这样子那这个是。我在台湾看到的就是非常非常的自由，非常非常的这个就是说你我觉得言论的自由，这个是在台湾，我想在有一段时间，那个应该是全世界最棒的。
Taiwan's democratization profoundly transformed the country, but it did not completely sever ties with its past. Under Li Tenghui's leadership, the Kuomintang sought to balance the population's growing democratic aspirations with the sensitive relationship across the Taiwan Strait. In this context, the party adopted a strategy of measured engagement with mainland China while maintaining a cautious distance. The 1992 consensus, negotiated by semi-official representatives from both sides, embodied this approach. This implicit agreement acknowledged the existence of one China, but deliberately left ambiguous what that China represented, allowing both sides to maintain dialogue while preserving their respective positions.
国民党的苏起的文胆苏起，他当时就写了，就利用官方的文书、官方的媒体去写了一个9·2共识，但事后苏起本人他也承认这个是虚构的，就是9·2共识一中各表，就是双方各表示他们都是，就是中国跟中华民国都各自表示他们是中国，然后这个叫做一中各表，然后9·2共识就是 先搁置在政治上的期间，来就其他方面的实质的部分来进行会谈。对，但是这个东西到了今天，其实会发现完全是破产的，因为中国完全不接受九二共识，中国的立场一直就是唯一的 China，the one China， 唯一的中国就只有中华人民共和国。那他们不承认中华民国的存在，也不容许台湾自称为是另外一个中国。
As Taiwan prepared to hold its first direct presidential elections in 1996, Beijing intensified its pressure to dissuade the island from further asserting its autonomy. Viewing these developments as a step toward formal independence, China conducted missile tests near Taiwan and staged large-scale military exercises, marking the beginning of the Third Taiwan Strait crisis. The United States, under President Bill Clinton, responded firmly. 2 U.S. aircraft carriers, accompanied by warships, were deployed to the region to deter Beijing and reaffirm Washington's commitment to Taiwan's security. Despite these threats, Taiwan stood its ground. In March 1996, the island held its first direct presidential elections.
记得最早最重大选举就是1996年的总统直选，那一次是台湾的第一次总统选举。那由国民党是推出李登辉连战，正副搭配，然后民进党推出的是彭明敏跟谢长廷。
那一次的投票，大陆一直要我们不可以总统直选，可是台湾还是坚持要办总统直选，所以那时候其实是很危险的一个状态。所以那个时候我可以去投票，我是很兴奋的，因为我可以决定用我的选票来决定我要成为什么样的国家的人。
前总统当时也是展现了他对于中国非常的强硬啊，对，所以那个台海军事演习，然后紧接着就是96年的总统选举，然后当时当然李登辉前总统他们是以极高的票数，但是后来也证明了啦，当时的国民党跟现在的国民党又是不一样的，那这个是很深刻的印象啦。当时其实民进党还没有完全成气候，但是我们已经做好了一些准备，所以一直到了2000年的时候，阿扁总统的选举就虽然是少数获胜，但是真正的成功的拿到了那个有40%民众的支持。
In 2000, Taiwan reached a historic turning point with the election of the Democratic Progressive Party. For the first time, the Kuomintang lost power, marking a decisive step in Taiwan's democratic evolution. This change reflected the Taiwanese people's growing desire to assert their national identity and sovereignty, distancing themselves from mainland China's influence. Meanwhile, Hong Kong was handed back to China in 1997 under the principle of one country, two systems. Gradually, the freedoms once guaranteed began to erode. In 2014, the Umbrella Revolution protests erupted in response to an electoral reform imposed by Beijing, which restricted the selection of candidates for Hong Kong's chief executive. This movement, led primarily by students, demanded free elections and rejected Beijing's interference. Although these massive protests did not lead to immediate changes, they revealed a growing will to resist authoritarianism. In 2015, the abduction of Lam Wing-Ki, a Hong Kong bookseller, by Chinese agents illustrated Beijing's increasing authoritarian drift.
当然是发生这个事件的话，首先失踪的人 也可以说的比较明白一些是，最大的老板在泰国被绑架带走去中国大陆。后来我所知道的，中国大陆派人去泰国把他绑走，是坐船湄公河，泰国那个湄公河去带去中国大陆的。那个时候大概是10月初左右，可能是9月底。当时我们书店里面4个同事，还有其中一个李波老板都不知道。到后来10月份的时候10月22、23号左右，我2个同事也去中国大陆。深圳过了海关以后，也给带走。那当然是我是10月24号去中國大陸的時候也給你帶走。
後上晝返回香港嘅銅鑼灣書店人員失蹤事件嘅第4日。
After 8 months in captivity, Lam Wing-Ki revealed that he had been detained by Chinese agents and subjected to intense interrogations. The authorities initially sought to understand his activities and the origins of the books he sold, then analyzed their content and his connections with other publishers. Lam was later pressured to participate in a forced confession, write a letter of repentance, and agree to protect China, which was presented to him as his true homeland.
其实他有一个很重要的，先把你的身份当成他自己的人，你明白吧？比方中国人这个身份就是他给你的，你的身份认同是怎么来的？是通过一个所谓的教育。文化教育，比方爱国就是嘛，他认为这个国家是你的，所以你要爱你的国家。你为什么要爱你的国家？因为你是中国人。自由这个，我去香港时候很自由嘛，还是当时中国大陆也没办法管香港，还没明显可以管香港。所以我的感想，因为我在香港长大的，英国政府给香港人很大的一个自由的空间。我忽然间明白，自由不是一定是有的，是要好好保护自由这个地方。
In 2019, new protests erupted in Hong Kong against the extradition bill, which threatened to subject Hong Kong citizens to China's judicial system. Fearing a complete takeover by Beijing, Lam Wing-Ki fled Hong Kong and sought refuge in Taiwan. Settling in Taipei, he opened a bookstore dedicated to banned books in China, becoming a symbol of intellectual resistance. President Tsai Ing-wen from the Democratic Progressive Party publicly expressed her support for him, reaffirming Taiwan's commitment to democratic values and freedom of expression.
他很明显，他不用说什么了，他跑过来书店，因为当时我是刚刚开店的第一天，他跑过来送了一个花篮。发牌子，就是恭喜我们在台湾开铜锣湾书店。大概是他引用圣经一句说话了，就是说公义是滚滚大江河水滔滔不作的流动的，所以他大概是这个意思。就是说，他很明显是支持香港这个2019年那个社会运动。
The formula one country, two systems, proposed in the 1980s by Deng Xiaoping, the pragmatic and reformist successor of Mao Zedong, as a solution for Hong Kong, was also suggested for Taiwan. In 2005, China reaffirmed this idea in its anti-secession law, emphasizing a peaceful reunification under this model.
香港回归中国之后，理论上到2047年应该都要维持原本的制度，但是很明显的，香港已经 展现给全世界看了，中国的谎言已经破产了。香港人并没有获得这样的一个真正的一个平等的自由的选举的待遇，香港人也不能够决定香港的事情，对，港人不能治港。然后在现在的香港，用来代表香港的、掌握香港统治权的，都是中国共产党所选出来的这些代理人。那这样的制度不是台湾人可以接受的。对，这一国两制是绝对台湾人如果被欺骗，可能一时会同意，但是如果真正遇到，台湾人绝对不可能接受。
Taiwan is not officially independent, but it operates as a sovereign state, with its own government, a thriving economy, and a distinct political system. China, which considers Taiwan a separated province, exerts constant pressure for reunification, combining military and diplomatic threats. Under President Xi Jinping, these pressures have intensified. The one country, two systems model proposed by China is firmly rejected in Taiwan, where it is seen as a direct threat to democracy and the island's autonomy. This rejection has fueled a growing desire for independence among the Taiwanese population.
中国共产党绝对不容许台湾独立，就国民党就可以用这个当 excuse， 一直讲说怎么样，台湾如果一定要宣布独立的话，那就会怎么样。那他吓的是那些中产阶级，老一辈的人的台湾人当然希望台湾独立，那年轻的一辈，叫做天然独就是台湾本来就是一个国家，他没有，他不必想那么多，说难道台湾不是一个国家吗？好奇怪。
Officially 在官方上面的承认，我们的邦交国只有10几个国家了，很少。但是在实质上，就承认台湾的护照，然后承认台湾的外贸关系，然后其实是普遍几乎全世界啊。对，所以在实质上，台湾是一个独立的国家。那我们现在只差一个名字，所以目前我们在国内的部分，我们所谓的本土派、独派。
Each step toward independence seems to bring Taiwan closer to a major conflict with China. Xi Jinping has repeatedly reaffirmed his commitment to reunification, calling it inevitable and declaring that no one can stop the historical trend of the motherland's reunification. These statements fuel concerns in Taiwan, where every move toward independence is seen by Beijing as a provocation, potentially triggering a military response.
我个人比较不认为台湾跟中国大陆之间会有战争，因为这是如果一旦发生战争，就是内战那就打起来了那这个就是台湾也后退。对中国，如果台湾一发生战争的话，情势如果中国不能控制的话，西藏也有问题，新疆可能也是，就是它的那个边境城市就全部起火了。那如果是这样的话，控制不住，那对我觉得这个内部，因为既然台湾可以你会来打台湾，那可能别的地方也会同样这一个会同样的遭遇。我个人的想法是
可是如果真的会发生战争，我觉得该发生的还是要发生，因为活在一个人治的社会里面，其实是一件很不愉快的事情，而且它不会是只有现在这样。它如果一旦两岸统一了，中国大陆如果没有改变，那之后的世世代代其实都会是这样的状况。那我觉得那也是一件很痛苦的事情。
Despite this tension, Taiwan has long maintained deep economic ties with China, particularly in industrial sectors. Their economic relationship is built on interdependent supply chains. Taiwan produces critical components, which are then assembled in China using its competitive labor force before being exported worldwide. During the Kuomintang era, Taiwan experienced spectacular economic growth, often referred to as the Taiwan miracle. This transformation turned the island into a global leader in strategic industries, particularly semiconductors, embodied by the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. These vital components power the digital and military infrastructure of major world powers. A war, beyond its devastating human consequences, would threaten to destroy these strategic industries. The main factor preventing an escalation is the silicon shield.
那台湾的细盾嘛，就是因为整个现在全球的半导体产业，台湾成为了最关键的一个地方。因为现在所有的科技产品几乎都需要用那个晶片零组件来提高它的自动控制啊，来提高它的侦测，来提高它的性能。然后这样子一个健全的一个完好的一个半导体设计，然后一个产品设计，它可以减少很多的零组件成本。那对于降低成本、降低售价，然后卖到全世界都有帮助。那台湾刚好就卡到了这一个很重要的点。
As long as China does not fully master the advanced technologies produced in Taiwan, the silicon shield appears to hold. However, this protection remains fragile. The recent opening of a TSMC factory in the United States illustrates Western efforts to diversify supply chains and reduce their strategic dependence on Taiwan. But China is not solely focused on a technological race. It also exerts constant military pressure on the island while seeking to exploit another key factor: the Kuomintang's gradual rapprochement with Beijing. Once a fierce opponent of the Chinese Communist regime, the Kuomintang has adopted a more conciliatory stance in recent years. What explains this shift?
我觉得国民党现在会跟中国的关系比较密切，是因为国民党对中国其实是有一些特殊的感情，因为国民党里面的人很多其实都是中国来台的第二代或者是第三代，他们跟中国之间的连结是比较深的，他们甚至是有亲人或者是亲戚还留在中国，他们对中国是有一份特殊的感情，所以他们会比较倾向于两岸能够统一，所以他们的关系就会产生转变啊。因为民进党很明显就是希望台湾独立嘛，切断台湾跟中国的关系，所以当然以中国来讲，他也会觉得国民党是跟他们立场比较相近的，因为希望都能够有两岸的统一。
不一定啊，谁说靠国民党就不会发生战争？我跟你讲啊，你时间久了，人家就急了啦，管谁，他会管你就是谁在这边的执政，对不对？对啊，你时间给他拖久了啊，不可能。你说国民党他会整晚搬出去吗？
In response to China's growing threat, Taiwan has been actively strengthening its defense capabilities. The island has increased its purchases of advanced military equipment from the United States, particularly in air defense systems. At the same time, Taiwan has extended the duration of mandatory military service, increasing it from a few months to 1 year. Edgar, a former member of the Special Forces, served there for 4 years.
I love to be a fighter. I love to be having a ability to protect someone. And I kind of hope everyone could have the mindset that if one day war is really happening, we all need to learn how to defend ourselves. Not just the soldiers inside army will stand out. Like Ukraine, all the nationalists, no matter you're a woman, you're a child, or you're just old, everyone has to fight for them, for their land. Not just you can't just like go abroad when the war happened and come back when it's over. It's not like that. So we have to have this mindset that one day we will have to defend ourselves, our nation, and even that means you might have to sacrifice yourself for that.
我在20年前就已经服役了，对，那当了2年的兵，对，那我认为以我个人来讲，我随时做好了本土防御的准备。应该说，我们不会畏惧战争，也不会畏惧牺牲。对，那并不是因为我们不在乎，而是因为我们在乎。我们知道，我们如果不站出来，那如果让中国的统治 轻而易举，那我们失去的会更多。我们所在乎、我们所珍惜的一切，要说有什么东西可以阻止我们，那就是因为我们有很多珍惜的东西。但是历史已经证明了，
那如果有那么多像他碰过那么多年轻人说，有一天等他打过来啊，就要为台湾奋斗的话，不必为台湾奋斗了，为他的家人奋斗就好了。每个人都为他的女朋友、为他的爱人奋斗，这样就够了。那当然啦，那时候就会逼那些大人了，尤其民进党就要改变了。所以民进党到那时候就非宣布独立不可。
Invading a territory located 150 kilometers off the Chinese coast, in the middle of the Taiwan Strait, presents a massive logistical and strategic challenge. The strait is marked by powerful ocean currents and unpredictable weather conditions, including frequent typhoons. Would a large-scale amphibious invasion by China truly be feasible?
So because we're an island, we are protected by the ocean, the strait, Taiwan Strait. So that's also the reason why people are not so afraid of being invading, because they believe it's not so easy to, like, for Russians they don't have to cross any barrier. They just, fly over the border, then, or the tanks, they can walk into the Ukraine. But in Taiwan, people tend to believe that they were protected, and most of them believe U.S. will help us to prevent war happening or stop China when they try to invade us. So that's kind of make us less aware of the real situation, make us lose our guard down.
第一波一定是飞弹先过来啊！这个算不算爆料啊？可以讲吗？好讲好了，因为我以前在当兵的时候有去过雷达站啊，然后它雷达站有一个很大的屏幕哦，在92、93年的时候吧，那20年前了，它上面就秀一个数字，然后如果我没有记错的话是1393，你知道那1393什么意思吗？就是那个时候20年前它就1390几颗吧，就瞄准台湾咯。而且那我也不知道什么飞弹啊，反正它就是一个数量，它会不会全部都是导弹也都会不，对不对？它也搞不好也不是，应该是导弹吧？对啊。
No, because the eastern part of Taiwan is really hard to invade. So most military experts expect them to invade on the west coast. But however, for me, if I'm the Chinese, I think the most effective way is just close the ocean. So if they surround us, nobody comes in or out in the airspace, then one day we will, just because we rely on maybe food or energy from other country. So if they just do this and they do this long enough, then one day we need to break that, or we will maybe insufficient of supplement.
以现在台湾来讲的话，它的防御系统的密集度很高啊。它事实上，虽然我们的飞弹数量没有大陆那么多了，但是基本上它有一定的防御程度。你说台湾海峡，你要跨过来，它其实现在的船只的性能都很好啊。不过，你从很多历史上啊，不管是很多战役上啊，你看那个大陆要抢滩过来，它可能要牺牲更多的人，对，而且台湾的军人也不是弱鸡啊，每次都说我们军人很弱，拜托，我们还是能打的。
Taiwan knows that it cannot withstand a Chinese offensive alone. The support of the United States is crucial and is based on a policy of strategic deterrence, officially respecting the One China policy while providing Taiwan with weapons and symbolic gestures. Nancy Pelosi's visit in 2022 illustrated this delicate balance, reaffirming democratic values without officially recognizing Taiwan's independence. Beijing's military response to her visit revealed China's sensitivity to any act that reinforces Taiwan's separate identity. One question remains unanswered. In the event of an attack, would the United States intervene beyond symbolic declarations?
那我相信美国其实在 战争发生的时候会必须支持台湾的。那这不是在于意志的问题，而是在于如果台湾被中国并吞了，那对于美国的影响会是非常负面的。对于美国，对于全世界，对我对于这方面非常务实，我不会去相信说什么为了正义，然后为了理想的在外交领域，在于国际关系领域，
本身自己要把自己的实力提升，不能太过度依赖一些国家。就是因为我们台湾现在实力没有提升起来，所以才会一直被欺负嘛。那我们在提升实力的过程之中，都是一些无意义的提升啊，就是，所以你说美国他会不会怎么样？如果就战争的角度来讲，美国会不会来帮台湾？我想应该是会，但是不会像帮助以色列那样子。对，他不可能是把所有的力量压在这个地方啦，因为台湾在世界上台湾这么小的一块土地啊，那最重要的前提就是台湾自己要提升自己实力，才不会被欺负啊，不是吗
？Caught between hoping for American support, strengthening its defense capabilities, and uncertainty over its national identity, Taiwan stands at a critical crossroads in its history. But beyond military strategies and diplomatic maneuvers, the most fundamental factor is the will and commitment of the Taiwanese people themselves. How can a new generation be inspired to carry this legacy forward?
不知道吧，反正很多人都认为我们是个国家，我也认为我们是个国家，但偏偏这个世界上有很多人都不认为台湾是一个国家，所以你说台湾在这世界上有什么样的未来？什么样的未来？哎呀，如果好的日子啊，美好的日子啊的到来，必须要经过战争的话，我就觉得那就只能这样子了。对啊，
什么中国的一部分，我们也不是说什么要世界强权去依附我们的附庸，我们是台湾就是台湾，台湾有自己的骄傲，台湾有自己的认同。对，我们也许不是最好的，但是我们是最独特的。这里就是我们的家，我们爱台湾是因为它就是我们的，而不是因为它有很多很多的第一名。
如果我们没有很好的教育的话，就现在你要如何说服现在这些只关心自己不关心国家大事的这年轻人去想说，我不是因为你现在得到的这些自由法治不是你天生有的嘛，是你必须去争取的，所以这个最困难的是在这一点啊。如果我们像我都已经70几岁，难道我只能到死而后已吧？可是你们这些年轻人呢？难道就不管吗？那不管的话那与其这样，不如早点投降算了。如果那么悲观，就早点投降算了。不过没有那么惨，我很有信心。
At a turning point, Taiwan faces external pressures while striving to preserve its identity. Despite its key role in the global economy, it remains politically isolated and under constant threat from China. To overcome these challenges, Taiwanese people must rely on their collective memory, democratic values, and innovative spirit. While U.S. support is essential, the unity and resilience of Taiwan's population are the true driving forces behind its future. Through its determination and strategic importance, Taiwan represents the fragile balance between democracy and authoritarian pressure. More than just a national challenge, its future raises a universal question. How can freedom be preserved in a rapidly changing world?
走到着鸟鼠多。其实啦，你是妖怪假势利哦，到遐哪来倒一喙食